afternoon, Mr. Greer, and welcome to our meeting this afternoon, and you may begin your opening statement.
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. This started well. I didn't fall down walking up here. I hope enough of the commissioners are Saturday Night Live fans, because I feel a little bit like Stuart Smalley. Ordinarily, you don't talk about yourself, but I'm here to tell you I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. And I can sense my mother-in-law out in Arizona just cringing at that start. The last advice my partner had was don't open the book, because I got a bunch of things written down that I'd like to talk about. So I'll try not to, and it's only going to happen if there's a 10-second gap when I just can't say anything and freeze up. Then I'll open it. It's fun to be here. I just love this courtroom. Been down here a bunch on appeals, been down here doing the commission thing like you folks are doing. As I've told the ones that I had the individual interviews with, I had it lucky there were just 2 Court of Appeals judges and 1 Supreme Court justice that were placed on the bench while I was on the 5 years on the commission. You folks really have got yeoman's duties with the numbers that you have and with the importance that picking good judges has assumed now in the state of Iowa. Because I've been hanging around the legal profession for a long time, I have a lot of opinions, and I'm getting old enough that I don't mind sharing them, so this is kind of a fun forum to do that in. But before doing that, and because you're streaming this, probably the average farmer out there in Northeast Iowa needs to find out, all right, who's this guy that's got the microphone now? Okay, grew up in a small town, big family, 6 kids. Dad was a lawyer, little brother's a lawyer. I married a pig farmer's daughter. There were 5 daughters in that family. All are interesting professionals. The one I married ended up being a lawyer, so there are lots of lawyers in the family, but we come from a pretty good, diverse background. My life has been interesting in terms of being on both sides of about everything, both sides of issues, both sides of the V between the plaintiff and the defendant. Been diverse geographically, started here in Des Moines at a good law firm. After 2 years, I went back home to practice in Dad's firm, and then for family reasons moved down to Marshalltown from Spencer to practice in the Marshalltown firm. And if you see fit to send me up to the governor, he sees fit to have me be one of the 3 justices who are going to be joining the court. That should be my last job, I think. That'll be one I can hold until the end. I have to admit that I enjoy practicing law so much that I fear that if I do get to sit up there someday, it won't be as much fun, and I kind of expect that, frankly, that it won't be as much fun. But I've had so much fun that somebody else can have the fun I'm having, and it would be nice to have an input in the law, in the Iowa law, from the other side of the bench. In the last 2 months, my wife Sharon and I have each tried 2 jury cases. We've had a good time doing it. Good people on the other side, good judges. Lots of laughs. One I've never tried a case before. He's going to be a lifelong friend, and I'll be a lifelong friend of his. And I challenge anybody who's out there, the lawyers and the judges that have had me in a courtroom, to find anybody to say that I've ever lost my temper, ever gotten mad enough in court to swear, ever lost it in any way. So on the test for judicial temperament, I invite you to check around. I know Grant Schulte's doing the blog right now saying Greer's making a fool of himself. I know Grant Schulte because I was at a meeting of Trial Lawyers Association where he was given a scholarship to go out west to a school and learn about the law, and it's been interesting to see that now he's kind of the courtroom reporter these days. So hi, Grant. Doing the volunteer things, yeah, and trying to make me look
Anybody
intelligent.
else you want to say hello to?
Well, that's it. I got my mother-in-law.
Like the
Grant.
Price is Right, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Believe it or not, I had a nephew that won $10,000 on The Price is Right. So hi, Steve, out in California. You know, I told those that I interviewed with individually, this was going to be a challenge for me not to be a smart aleck, and already I failed the test. so sorry about that. What you need on this court is somebody that works well with people, and not just the people that are up here. I think you need, given the times that we live in and the amount of ink that we're seeing put into this issue, you need somebody that gets along well with the people across the street in the governor's office and in the legislature. And I think because I've been lucky enough by volunteer things to be lobbying for decades now for different things, for the Bar Association, lobbied for the raising the court-appointed lawyers' fees for the American Cancer Society. I've been constantly lobbying both here and in Washington, D.C. It's given me an opportunity to get the people in the governor's office to know who I am and what I'm like, and the leaders in the legislature to know who I am and what I'm like. So, you know, I know Craig Paulson and Dick Kibbe, Mike Gonstall, and they know me because I've had the opportunities to be there saying, hey, we need to have money for this cause or for that cause, and they've been good causes. And so if you need somebody that can help Mark Cady and Justice Wiggins and the others keep the doors open, keep the lines of communication open, I might not be the worst person for that job. The volunteerism has also allowed me an opportunity to serve with just about every lawyer commissioner here in one fashion or another. Each of you has been involved in the Bar Association activities and commissions and committees, and so that's how we know each other. But it's also let me know what people are like out in the rural areas, in the small towns, what kids are going through if they're going through a cancer treatment and that sort of thing. And it's been a lucky thing for me to be able to intersect with a lot of people around the state. I doubt many candidates have been able to try jury cases in every single one of the districts in Iowa like I have. My first case was eastern Iowa on the river. Second case was western Iowa on the river. Third case was up in my hometown of Spencer when I practiced here against Rosemary and Bill Sackett. My first case back home, moving into Spencer, was against Joe Fitzgibbons, who just punched me in the nose on a case up in Dickinson County. And
Are you under oath?
No, I'm not under oath, am I? But it's been fun to have that opportunity to be able to do those things. I have a lot of things I would like to say, and I'm really sorely tempted to open the book, but it's a little bit like my grandmother used to say. She was a speech coach. Keep in mind the 3 B's of public speaking. Be short. Obviously, I've got that covered. Be sincere, and be quiet. And at this time, I'd like to be quiet and just answer questions you might have.
Let's start on the right side this time. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good afternoon, Mr. Greer.
Mr.
And
President.
I have seen you lose your temper. I think it was in about 1970 when you were playing and starring for the Spencer Tigers. Seriously here.
They shouldn't have called that foul on me, Joe.
On a serious note, we have many qualified candidates that we're going to be visiting with here over the next couple of days. And I encourage anyone who is carefully looking at this process to look at the CVs, the body of information, but particularly I wish they'd look at yours. Because if there's anyone who's been a volunteer, a great citizen, an outstanding person in your community, you're it. And I think sometimes lawyers get attacked, and if they would see the body of work that you have done, I think people would have a different opinion of our profession. Now, having said that, you practiced in rural Iowa, in northwest Iowa. You're now practicing in central Iowa. Although Marshalltown's not a large community, it may be a bit different than practicing in northwest Iowa. There are many people where I practice on a daily basis who are very concerned about administrative issues. In fact, there are a number of people that will suggest to you that the outcome in the recent retention vote may well have been a result of the court administratively stubbing their toes on issues as broad as court reporter issues, staffing, security in the rural areas. I'd like to know your feeling in that respect. If you were chosen to be a Supreme Court justice, what might you do to change that perception? And I can assure you it's a very strong feeling among judges, lawyers, courthouse personnel, and what have you in northern and western Iowa.
Your uncle and your father and mine taught me that the first thing you do is you make friends with the people that run the courtroom, the court reporters and the court attendants and those people, and you never forget them. And we're not far enough removed from those days to remember how that goes. One thing I think that would be very helpful is to make sure that there is a good open dialogue between the different factions that have a real stakeholders' interest in this. And so, for instance, I think the rules should not be changed and administration should not happen without getting input from the real stakeholders. And the year I spent as president of the Bar Association gave me a good opportunity to appoint people to 48 committees and commissions, and to know how well they worked and how hard people volunteered. And by the way, I challenge you, unless it's the insurance industry, I challenge you to find another profession that has more volunteer work out in the communities. Lawyers really do a good job of it. We take a bad rap as lawyers, but we shouldn't in terms of what people do in the community. Those committees are set up to look at rule changes, so whether it's the rules of civil procedure or rules of appellate procedure, whether it's the way that things are happening. I know an earlier candidate was asked, oh, by the way, you feel like you're cheating if you're watching the streaming video before you come down here to interview like I'm doing today. So by tomorrow, people ought to really know what the questions are and what they're going to say. But anyway, those stakeholders need to have input. Even if the Supreme Court is the one making a decision that a rule has to change, it still needs to get the input from the district court judges, the ALJs, the magistrates, depending on what the rules are, and from the Bar Association and the lawyers. Administratively too, I would love it if the court would, when I went around to the different counties, up in Northwest Iowa, I had a Bar Association meeting in Sioux City, I had one in Council Bluffs. I was hearing that they wanted more of the core function of cases being decided than rules being changed. It's an easy complaint to make if you're not the one that has to change the rules, but I was hearing that, and I do share that. It seems to me if you get good people in administrative positions, that they can do an awful lot of that with the right input, and that the Supreme Court can do its core function of deciding cases.
Any other questions? Mr. Pace.
I had one. Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good afternoon, Mr. Greer.
Afternoon.
You have a very distinguished academic background also. I won't read all of that. It's in here. But if you could talk just a minute about your appellate experience. You alluded to it in your remarks that you'd been in this courtroom and you'd made arguments before, but could you give us some sense of what kind of cases you have argued? Sure. And that sort of your appellate experience?
I'd be glad to. A couple that don't show up, but I wrote the briefs on, were when I was at Grief in Sydney, and involved a very interesting divorce with about $20 million at stake. Another one involved a custody battle involving a lawyer where the spouse had moved out of state with the child. I'm happy to talk about the $2.6 million verdict that I was able to withhold on behalf of my client against two lawyers and two CPAs and a lawyer here in town. Most of the appellate work actually has been in the family law area. I have a one-at-a-time rule. I don't take on two custody battles at the same time, but generally I'm doing divorce work, and I've had some come that way. Another case that I think the Fitzgibbons law firm and the Hamilton law firm were in was the Bourne versus Madigan case. I still don't understand that one very well, involving expert witnesses. That was a motorcycle grain wagon accident case. Rick Berry and I had an appeal that involved a friend of mine who played defensive back with me in the backfield at Spencer, who fell from a ladder in the airport. We were able to withstand an attack on a $164,000 verdict for that gentleman against the ladder company. One of the first cases I handled in Marshalltown was the one that set the law, or confirmed the law on not having punitive damages against municipalities. That was a kind of an interesting case. Paul Peglow tried the case well, got a $5,000 punitive $1 compensatory verdict against the city of Marshalltown in an employment thing. We were able to, I was defending the city, we were able to get the $5,000 taken away, and he's never asked me for the buck, actually. So. Those are all I can think of, Mr. Pace.
Thank you.
No.
Any other questions over here? How about on this side? Mr. Brody.
In the material you provided to us, you had an interesting definition of what activist judge means. And I was wondering, based on that definition, can you share your thoughts on how you would approach your role as a justice in the Supreme Court with regard to this third branch of government?
I sure can. I would love to. And the Iowa State Bar Association has a wonderful website where they keep the old columns that have been written, and I did write one that involved my view of activist judges. We've never had a problem, in my perception, in Iowa with activist judges, not since I started in 1978. We don't have judges that are out there looking to get a case so that they can change the law and come up with a new law. The activist judges that we've had have been the ones, well, like Chief Justice Katie is a good example. Our daughter ran cross country, so we go up to Fort Dodge for the state meet. Who's out there on the sidelines helping with the count and that sort of thing? Who's the volunteer up there? It's your Chief Justice.